Hey guys, thank you all so much for being here for this event. I am just absolutely thrilled to have Thomas Olde Heuvelt here tonight. I knew I'd butcher that. Um, for his
You
new
said it
book, Echo.
perfectly like 2 minutes ago.
I know, it's the nerves. Um,
It's so hard.
but this is the book, Echo, and it is absolutely phenomenal. I read his book, Hex. It was one of the best horror books I'd read in years. And I'm so thrilled to have him here with his new book. And so Thomas, not only is the internationally best-selling author with Hex, but Hex is in development with James Wan, who's just a fantastic horror director, producer, and Gary Dauberman. He was the first translated author to win a Hugo Award, which is quite an honor. And then with him as a conversation partner, we have Christopher Golden, and his new book is Road of Bones, which is another chiller. And I love, if you guys look, there's that skull there as the road goes through it. It's just really fantastic design. So you have two authors with two chilling chillers with winter themes. So Thomas is going to be talking about his new book. We just want to let you guys know in the audience that there is a question box down at the bottom. If you guys have questions for the authors, we'd love to have you submit those and ask anything you want. We also have a buy book button. It's the green button you'll see right under the screen. Really encourage you to please support these wonderful authors for being here. Support us in this curious galaxy. If you get a copy of Echo, Thomas will give you a signed book plate that he'll send. And Chris has also graciously offered for any of the books you get of his that he's going to be sending signed book plates to us as well that we can ship. So I'm going to head out and turn this over to Chris. And thank you guys so much for all being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Look. Oh, so first of all, before we get started, I want to say I'm so glad that there are people here and that we're doing this for Mysterious Galaxy. Literally one of the best stores in the friggin' universe. So as soon as you get to San Diego, you have to go. It's such an amazing store, and I've done so many events with them. Incredible. And second, Thomas, I want to say for everybody that I apologize that you're the one out of focus, because you're so good looking that it's just ridiculous that I'm the one who's really sharply in focus and you're all fuzzy. But I think you're fuzzy because it's 3 o'clock in the morning where you are.
It is 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm in London in a hotel which has it has some sort of internet connection, but it's not that fast. We were a little bit afraid that we were creating a hotspot actually through the phones to make it work. But I'm there.
But yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You're here.
So I'm originally from the Netherlands. So that's another hour away, another hour of time difference away. So normally this would have been 4 a.m. for me. But I'm in London right now on promo trip for Echo, which is really awesome.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the book. I think everybody should get it and read it. And I just have to say, I want to get to we're going to work sort of backwards. We're going to start with the current book, but I want to talk in a little while about the origins of Thomas Olde Heuvelt. I know I didn't say that correct, but it was better.
Yeah, it was much better. Not to throw any shade, but no. It is a difficult last name. It's Olde Heuvelt, we say in Dutch. It's Old Dutch dialect, and it means old hill, which is kind of fitting for Echo.
For this book.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's talk about that. So, for anybody who read Hex, I'm not sure. Hopefully, the people who are listening to us right now did read Hex. I loved it. It's so creepy. This book is really different, and so I want you to do this sort of like Hollywood late night talk show, set up the clip version of just sort of tell everybody what the book is about, and then kind of where did it come from?
All right. So Echo, the way Hex is my modern twist on the witchcraft archetype in horror, Echo is my possession novel. Echo is about a guy, a mountaineer from the Netherlands, who goes to the Swiss Alps, has a horrible accident high up in the mountains. His German climbing partner is missing, presumed dead. He returns from the mountains in a coma, face wrapped in bandages, and when he wakes up, he feels he has changed. And even though the book tells his story, it's more his partner's story. His partner, Sam, a New York student who hates the mountains, who hates his partner climbing, who hates the whole mountaineer aspect of his relationship, because he's afraid of losing him. And he's possessed by the mountain. He's possessed by this force of nature that's now raging inside of him and changes him and everything around him. I love possession stories. I love The Exorcist, the quintessential possession story. But what I don't like about possession stories is that there's always that religious counterpart to it. There's always a devil or a demon, and then there's a priest coming to exorcise. Whereas possession is so much more. You can be possessed by anything. You can be obsessed by anything. And I am a mountaineer myself. And even though I wasn't raised religiously in the Netherlands, religion is not really a big part of our people anymore. But still, whenever I go into the mountains, it's as if mountains possess souls, like they are alive. And a lot of people who are climbing feel that. They feel that each and every mountain has a specific kind of character. And whenever you climb them, you touch base with that character. And some are very welcoming, and some feel very hostile, and they feel very creepy. And I thought, wouldn't it be awesome if you have a story about a mountaineer who actually becomes possessed by this force of nature?
So that's where it came from. But you have this. So the mountain itself has this sort of malevolence, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to spoil anything for people. But one of the things I found interesting is you're talking about it being your possession novel and your exorcism. Well, not exorcism, your possession novel, but it's sort of counterpoint to The Exorcist in a way. But it's also reminiscent for me. I should say the mountain, the Maudit. I don't know, is that's probably wrong pronunciation, but it's reminiscent to me in some ways of like the Marston House in its way, in the sense that it isn't just that the mountain is malevolent or that it's possessed Nick, but it's also its malevolence sort of like bleeds out into the community around it, right?
It does, definitely. What I wanted to do is I wanted to write. Echo is in a sense my love letter to the Gothic novel. I love the classic Gothic novel where place, the sense of place, a place being haunted, is so important. And more so, in the classic romantic novels, the classic Gothic novels, there's the sense of nature being alive, that there's this soulification in nature where all these romantic poems about the clouds, about the seas, about the mountainscapes. If you face nature as a person, you feel how small you are as a human being. And I get what you're saying about the Marston House, because in a sense that is a very Gothic trope as well, like that big huge house on top of the hill in Salem's Lot, of course, Stephen King. You become awestruck by something that much bigger than you, and that's the essence of the Gothic novel. And in that sense, Echo is a Gothic novel, both in theme and also in form and in the way the story is narrated. I really want to pay homage to the Gothic story.
But it's also this thing about, like, obviously Sam, who is Nick's partner, is the character that you, as the reader, are most connected to, because he's not the one who's possessed, right? He's the
No,
one who's feeling the very human feelings, the fear and the concern for the man he loves and all of this stuff. But also, he has this kind of, it's like dealing with anybody who has an obsession. It's like trying to rescue somebody from drug addiction, or whatever it might be. You know, you have somebody that you really love who's fallen prey to something, and I again, it's sort of like you have to go into the place where that person is addicted, when they're surrounded by all of the things that give them their unhealthy lifestyle, and try to get them out, or a cult that you want to deprogram them from.
Yeah.
So, like, sort of talk a little bit about the relationship there between the two of them, and what that balance is in the human, sort of the ordinary human versus the supernatural element.
Yeah. So Sam, like I said earlier, he hates the mountains, hates everything that has to do with the mountains because of something that happened in his past, in the cabin in the Catskills, upstate New York, where he came from, where his grandparents had a house where they spend a lot of winters. He, in a sense, echoes a love story. I like that aspect of it. I mean, it's kind of a sweet love story in that sense. What happens is Sam, even though he loves Nick to the core, the book starts at a point where Nick comes back from that mountain changed, maybe for the good. He has his face wrapped in bandages. He does not know what's underneath the bandages, and Nick doesn't want to show because he feels there's something behind that cannot come out. And the human aspect of that, obviously, is that when we are in love, we always tell each other, you know, we'll be together till the very end. We'll be together, whatever happens, whether you end up in a wheelchair, whether you end up in an accident, where you know, whether you lose a limb or get burned in a fire, and that's easy to say when you're in love. But I wanted to be real about it because Sam also is just a young 24-year-old guy who's discovering himself, discovering other people around him, and now is confronted with a partner that is changed for good. His face is utterly changed, not only supernaturally but also physically. And can you actually sustain a relationship in those conditions? And we all wish we would say yes, and of course, and that doesn't matter. But I wanted to be real about it, and it is more difficult in reality, I think.
Oh, I think especially when you're young, right? You know, you're
Yeah,
like, you may be passionately in love, but
yeah,
all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I'm going to spend the rest of my life with somebody who is not only probably hideously disfigured, but also is going to be emotionally completely different from the person I fell in love with
oh yeah,
from now on.
yeah.
So it's like, it's that struggle of like, he wants to stay in love and he wants to be the person he thought he would be, but it's really hard.
And the irony is obviously that in Echo, even though he has these doubts, and these doubts I think are very real and human, um, during the course of the book, without spoiling too much, he does actually become, like you said, addicted to that new power inside of his boyfriend. Definitely, um, even though he hates everything that has to do with the mountains, he himself experiences the mountain inside Nick and becomes awestruck by it as well. He becomes obsessed, possessed by it as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, because it's that Nick has that response to the mountain, but once he's possessed, Sam is having that response to Nick.
Yeah.
Right, in the same way, in that moment. I want to talk about that a little bit. And again, it's tough to talk about certain things in this book without providing spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to remind everybody, by the way, go put your questions in the Ask a Question section. And also, I'm going to be very careful not to spoil this, but I want to say carefully, there are moments in this book that are, I think that I'm allowed to swear, Mysterious Galaxy. There are moments in this book that are some of the most amazing, transgressive, what the fuck moments that I've encountered in a really long time.
Well, thank you.
And you know the ones that I'm talking about. And there are moments that should not work, but they really do work. Moments where the book goes from this is a really good book to, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. And I just wonder, like, if you, and I know there are so many times as a writer that I might come upon a moment, an opportunity writing a story to do something like that. And occasionally I will, but I know I second guess myself all the time. So I just have to ask you, like, do you hesitate when you get to those moments, or are you just all in? You just go for it?
Of course, I hesitate. Like every writer and every story, you always self-question, you always self-doubt when you're writing it. But on the other hand, what I come from a standpoint of practicality. I am Dutch. We're very practical, down to earth people. So whenever I come up with some sort of a concept that, like you said, should not work, I started thinking practically. So what does it actually mean when the person is possessed by a mountain? If you were possessed by a mountain, I would stand in front of you, what would I experience? What would I feel? Would I sense the mountain inside of you? Would I get vertigo? Would I feel the power of the avalanche or the storm or the cold or all of the storm, all those things? And at the same time, what does a mountain want? That was the thing I struggled with most. Whenever someone is possessed by an evil force, a demon, a devil, there's a clear goal. There's always a goal of the possession. But in this case, a mountain doesn't want anything. But it changes what Nick wants, right? It changes, it awakens his darker desires. It awakens his hidden powers, if you will. There's a story within the book, and I won't spoil there, but that gives you an insight in who Nick was as a kid. For the first time when he went into the mountains, something horrible happened. And that story gives you a sense that there was always something slumbering inside Nick himself. That this is just a prolongation of, basically. But indeed, there are really lovely dynamics in the book. I think my favorite sentence of the book is when Sam actually realizes that Nick is possessed and that there is actually this mountain inside of him, and he says, and I'm quoting by I don't have the book right here in front of me, but so I'm paraphrasing, but he says something like, I was Bella with balls. My boyfriend was no sparkling vampire pussy werewolf, but a fucking mountain god. And that just was awesomeness to me,
Yeah. Well, and again, it is, you already alluded to this, so I'm not giving anything away. Just this constant idea that Nick does not want Sam to remove the bandages. He doesn't want Sam to see what's on the other side, partly because Nick himself doesn't know, but he knows it's going to be something that shouldn't be seen.
Yeah.
And I'm, again, not giving anything away. There's a moment when Sam peaks. Let's just leave it at that. And that in particular is the moment where I just was like, okay, any fucking thing can happen in this book. And I loved it. I just was like, it's really audacious, and I love the way it plays constantly in this liminal space between tangible reality. A mountain is something that is so tangible and real, and yet sort of the same way that the mountain in this novel can't be really remembered or noticed by people unless they're focused on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's that thing where it sort of exists, and it's almost like a Twilight Zone kind of
Yeah.
mountain, I guess, you know.
It's not on any map. It's not there, you know. Yeah.
So let me ask you, before we talk about young Thomas, let me ask you about the mountaineering, because you know, I know you. I don't know if you read my novel Ararat. I know we had talked about it at one point, and I have only ever climbed mountains that can be climbed without gear in a single day.
Ball, basically, yeah.
So I've done that.
Yeah.
You know, they're not very big, but you know, Cadillac Mountain here in Acadia National Park that's here. You know, it's not, you know, it's not a problem. I've
But
never done the kind of mountain climbing that you have done. So when I worked on Ararat, I was relying on research. I talked to guides that took groups up the mountain and all that stuff. And
yeah.
so what drew you to doing it in the first place? So you had this idea because you're on the mountain.
Oh,
so
yeah, definitely.
Why were you on the mountain in the first place, I guess is my question.
You know, mountaineering is a life-altering experience. It is dangerous. It is frightening every now and then. There are factors in the mountains that you have no control over because they are so much more, they're so much bigger and so much more powerful than you are as a person. So you never are 100% sure if you come back to the valley that evening if you go into the mountains. On many occasions, I have climbed a peak with my climbing buddy in the Swiss Alps or the French Alps or Italy, and felt completely in control of the situation. And I do quite challenging climbing. So there's ice climbing, there's rock climbing, you know, with all the equipment, the ropes and all that. I don't do free soloing. I don't do that kind of stuff. I want to, you know, I want to be on a rope. But you feel completely in control of yourself and your environment, and you have this feeling of fulfillment. And then you go down to the valley, and a couple of days later, you read a news item on the Swiss Polizei website, which says that 2 other people went up that day, and they didn't come back down because they fell off. And then it hits really close home because those 2 people didn't go up there to die either. They had the same kind of confidence probably, and that's when you know you're not fully in control of the environment, and that is a frightening thing. All that said, it is also one of the most beautiful things you can do when you, as a person, conquer something that's so much bigger than you, and in doing so, you're conquering yourself. And when at 3 a.m. in the morning, it's pitch black dark, it's icy cold, you plow through your own nausea to get up that slope. And when suddenly then the sun rises over the glaciers and you see the clouds below you, it's a feeling of pure magic. It's so freaking beautiful. And when you reach that summit and you pick up the summit rock, I am like Nick in the book that I collect summits that I climb. I pick up the summit rock and, you know, add it to my collection. You feel you've accomplished something that nobody else has, which is of course an illusion because more people climb. I'm not the only one doing that, but still, you feel alone with that mountain, and that's something really powerful.
It sounds powerful and beautiful and inspiring until you mention the fact that it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're in the dark on the mountainside. Something about that, I'm not, you know. I'm also much older than you are, so that's
I don't know that much, but
yeah, well, you know, I look much older. That's so you know, the thing is, I know that you I feel like, you know, one of my favorite bands, my favorite musicians is a guy named Frank Turner, who's an Englishman, and in the UK he just had the #1 album in the UK.
Okay.
and he sells it. He headlines festivals, and he sells out. He plays in arenas. He does all, and then he comes on tour here. He's about to come on tour here, and he's doing a tour called 50 States in 50 Days, and he plays these venues that are maybe 700 to 1,000 people. And so he's trying to make it work here.
Yeah.
And so when I was preparing for this, I was thinking about you and thinking about Frank Turner, and I feel like there's a connection there, because you have this established career in your home country. In the Netherlands, you are a best-selling author. You're all over the place. You go and you do this stuff, and everybody knows you.
Yeah.
So here, in the U.S., it's like we're still trying to make that happen, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So obviously Hex opened a lot of eyes and got a lot of people paying attention to you. But I'd love to hear more about like you starting out when you were starting writing in the Netherlands, and like, is there a horror community in the Netherlands? What's that like?
There isn't at all. And what's interesting is that I only broke through in the Netherlands after Hex was published in the United States. Stephen King tweeted about the book. I went on tour for 6 weeks in the States. And then the Dutch late night shows invited me on, and then all the media jumped on the book, and the book hit the bestseller list, and it's been selling ever since, and my new ones as well. There is no tradition of horror fiction in the Netherlands at all. When I grew up, I was relying on translated fiction. Our literature is very practical and down to earth, and frankly a little bit boring, I think. But so I like the more plot-driven literature of the United States. I studied American literature at university, actually, because I like this. There's more story in there, not only in genre fiction, but in fiction in general. There's more story, and I like that. So I had to rely on reading translated Stephen King, Clive Barker, Peter Straub, and Dean Koontz. Those were the only 4 who were translated.
Wow.
Then when I started reading in English, my horizons broadened, and I thought, I love these kind of creepy stories. I was raised with creepy stories. My grandfather was a storyteller. He told me these kind of stories before bedtime, and they were not really suited for children when he did that, but I loved it anyway. There was a big, uphill struggle, if you will, of trying to make these books work in the Netherlands. It was only after they were published in the United States that the Netherlands, embraced them. And it's a strange thing that.
Yeah, that's really ironic, actually.
Yeah,
that, it would take, but it's great. I mean, if only a mention from Stephen King would get you invited on American late night shows.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like where is that phone call from Jimmy Kimmel or
Exactly, Stephen Colbert, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Colbert would be my ideal if I could go on.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Colbert for sure.
But it's an amazing ride. I mean, Hex was translated in about 25 countries around the world, and I've been touring like crazy for a couple of years before COVID hit, obviously. And it's a fantastic opportunity when you're from a country in a language group that is so small. Only 25 million people around the world speak my language, so it's fantastic that these stories cross borders now, and that I get to meet readers everywhere I go. So, and everywhere you go, it's starting all over from scratch, which is exciting at the same time.
Yeah. Forgive me. I stupidly, I was like, I've had a cough for a couple of weeks, and I started coughing. So I took a cough drop I'm going to put this cough drop in my mouth to prevent myself from coughing. But now the cough drop is going to be interfering with my speaking properly. But anyway.
You'll be good.
Yeah. Man.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about Road of Bones as well.
Yeah, sure. I'm up for it.
What I wanted to know, especially because Road of Bones also has a very strong sense of place and a unique place in this case, right? It sets all the way up in Siberia, and why did you choose that environment, that hostility of the icy cold, which, like Echo, is it's a very strong sense of place.
Yeah, it was really interesting when I was reading Echo, because I was like, I felt very simpatico with you when I was
Yeah.
reading it.
Hmm.
You know, I ran across an article about the Road of Bones and about the tragic, abhorrent circumstances that led to so many people dying on the road.
Yeah.
And honestly, part of it was that I read it and I thought, this was a horrible thing that happened, but I know some horror writer is going to stumble upon this story the way I just did. And they're going to write the horror story that's about, 300,000 dead people underneath the road rising up to take their vengeance. And in actuality, I have had some negative responses to my book because it isn't that book.
Hmm.
I have had some people give negative responses, and even a couple of studio sort of producers have said, "Well, can't we just if we did a film version, couldn't we do that?" I'm like, no,
So the
because
real story, you mean, the what really happened?
well, no, it's not about the real story. They want the story that would be the lowest common denominator horror story, which is all of those people rising from the dead to get their vengeance.
Hmm.
And that's just not one of the reasons I wanted to write my book is because I had an idea for what I wanted to do, and I
Yeah.
knew I had to do it before somebody wrote that version.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've always loved is this idea that there are still, we assume, because we live in these sort of normal environments, we assume that there's nothing else on Earth that's left to be explored or exploited or ruined by the touch of humanity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there really are places on the Earth that are beyond the edges of human endurance, where we don't go and fuck it up because we can't live there anyway, right?
No. Yeah.
And what I loved about the idea is that there are people who live in the coldest inhabited towns in the world are on this road. In the wintertime, with wind chill, it can get to 80 or 90 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. If you shut your car off,
It's a death
you will
sentence.
not be able to turn it back on
Yeah.
if it's not garage. And so for me, it's this idea of when you get to the edge of humanity, what's beyond that edge? There's wilderness there, and there's a sense of primeval presence.
Yeah.
That also exists on the top of a mountain that very few people get to climb, where people haven't ruined that yet.
Yeah.
And so for me, there's power in that. If I believed in sort of the ancient primeval power of wilderness, which I guess a part of me does, it's in those places in the world. And so those
Yeah.
were kinds of the things that were spurring me on.
Well, I am very happy that you didn't write that easy story about it, what you said, because I think yours is way more subtle. And but I was wondering, the things that do happen in your book, and I also want to be careful with spoiling, so you can choose what you want to say about that in actuality. But are they actually based on on local legends that are real, that are there, that.
Yeah, that's the question everybody asks. And, for me, I've done this in so many of my books. I have kind of an underlying belief of my own. It's not what I believe, but it's sort of what I've created fictionally, which is about, sort of a world before the world,
Yeah.
the sort of good and evil that existed. in what you'd say the world before the world, before in that part of the world, the religious beliefs are split between Christianity and animism and atheism, but and the animism, very shamanistic belief. They believe in the spirits and everything, and all of that stuff. And so what I've done is I've taken a few actual legends and bits of folklore from that part of the world, and I've incorporated it with the kind of things that I have in a lot of my fiction, which are this sort of like older, before those things that they believe in.
Yeah.
There's something even older than that.
Yeah.
And I mix them together. So again, like without giving anything away, and there are moments in the book that I did think, should I include this? And I did it anyway because it felt like that kind of book.
Yeah. How far do you go in the actual? Well, you probably did a lot of research into the area, obviously, because it's very detailed and it all feels when you read it like you like you've been there. You've probably have them because it's so far out there.
I have not exactly.
No, yeah, but
I've been to St. Petersburg. That's the only part of Russia I've ever visited, and it doesn't look like I'm going anytime soon. So
yeah, no, probably not. No, unfortunately. But how far do you go in actually researching the physicality of what you write? Because you write the cold really well, and I've experienced cold on mountains. Cold is it's a monster, and it's devouring you if you get consumed by it. How far do you go? I remember I wrote a short story once about gravity of the Earth shifting around. It was a story that got me to Hugo, and everything fell off Earth's surface basically. And I was upside down in front of my window all the time to see how stuff looked and how would I go from A to B and stuff like. How do you incorporate the cold and all the physicalities when you write? Do you?
Well, I've
I've
never been cold like that, but I live in New England, which is in the wintertime can get very cold. With wind chill, it can get below zero, but not very far. But I've also, when I was younger, I skied and I skied in temperatures that I would look up at the at the thermometer and I'd be like, oh, I had no idea it was that cold.
Yeah.
And so you think about that. But now also that I'm older, I'm only 54, but already at 54, like cold means something different at 54 than it did when I was 34 or 24.
Yeah.
It hurts, so I extrapolate that, like, what is it like when you have to fear the cold, even when you can feel it coming down the collar of your shirt, and you think, oh, if I'm not careful, this could kill me.
Yeah.
And so for me, it isn't so much just about the temperature. It's about the fact that it could kill you or maim you or scar you. And you could literally die in 10 minutes there in the wintertime if you're not careful. So for me, the cold is more in this sense about the threat, the menace of it. It's way scarier, I think, than, like zombies,
Yeah. And it becomes a character in itself in your book. And
but then as far as the region is concerned, one of the things I was really thinking about, and it was really driven home when I was researching, and I came across this this article that included a music video that was made to the tune of a Taylor Swift song by 4 young guys who were reindeer herders. I think I told you this story, right?
Yeah.
So they were 4 young guys who herd reindeer, and they made this video in their regional, the clothing that they wear, where they changed the lyrics of this Taylor Swift song to sing about how hard it is to find a girlfriend.
Yeah.
Because the girls where they're from, they grow up and they leave.
Yeah.
And the ones who do stay are girls they've known all their lives who might as well be their sisters. And it was such a universal thing. It was such a thing that you could easily understand. and them making this video to a Taylor Swift song made me just realize, okay, like my characters have to go into this environment with the typical white Westerner assumption that the people who live in that area are going to be in some way backward, you know, and find immediately that the people are not like that at all. That they're people like anywhere else. They just have different customs and different culture, but they're just people. And so I don't know. I really enjoyed all the research I did for the book, and I'd love to go. I would like to do it in the summertime. I wouldn't want to do it in the winter.
Yeah, probably
But
not. I love what you described. You included that scene in the book, actually, and
yeah,
I recognize those kind of things when you do research about particular places and you find these kind of things that seem like too crazy for what you can come up with yourself, but they are very colorful, pictures of what a culture is like in a place like that. That's very good. I want to.
All right, so I'm going to turn to these questions because we're going to run out of time otherwise.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Can I ask you one quick question about the cover of your book, because it's so striking, so beautiful. Were you involved in the design process for that?
No. The designer is a guy named Jonathan Bush,
and
my editor just sent it to me. In fact, yesterday I got the cover to my next one, which is also from Jonathan Bush, and he's fantastic. The new cover's just as good. I mean, I love it so much.
I can't wait to see it.
I'll send it to you after, but you can't share.
No, sure, I know.
All right, so Sam asks, do either of you get a little scared by anything you've just written? You finish a creepy scene for the first time. Do you ever get chills?
I do every now and then, definitely. There, the opening scene in Echo, it starts with a young woman, an American woman, waking up in a mountain chalet in the Swiss Alps. She's snowed in. She's waiting for her brother to come there, but she doesn't know if he can come home, actually. It's the middle of the night. She is in an attic room, needs to go to the bathroom, and the only way down there is through basically a hole in the floor where there's a steep staircase. And when she goes there, she sees people in the staircase, and they're staring up at her. And she goes back to the bed, and she is jolted, of course, and she tells herself, okay, I must have imagined this because there's no one here, the doors are closed, and there cannot be anyone here. And then so she goes back, when she's a little bit more awake, back to the staircase. But these people are still there, and they've come a little bit closer. I remember very well writing that. It was based on something that I actually, not dreamt of, but that moment when you wake up, in the middle of the night, and you actually need to use the bathroom, and you go down and you see people everywhere, basically. That happened to me, and I thought, this is so freaky. And I, when you write, you are in control, or more or less in control, at least. So it's a little bit different than when I watch a scary movie or read a creepy book, when you are surprised by stuff more, and you don't have creative control that just lures you in. But at the same time, every now and then when I write scenes like that, you just shiver, and you don't really like turning off your laptop after the work is done and go upstairs in the dark. That's when you know that you've done it right. How about you?
I don't feel like I get scared, but I do get this, like, and I'm feeling it right now, manifesting it, sort of this like little frisson, this cold feeling at the top of my spine, the base of your neck, and occasionally, like, I remember I wrote a scene in a novel of mine called Dead Ringers that it's about doppelgangers, and the woman has a child who's supposed to be asleep in the other room, and she's lying in bed, and she's sort of facing away from the door. And while she's lying there, she hears her child talking to mommy, and she's like, "This is what's going on? What is she playing some kind of game?" And
Mm.
then she hears her own voice responding
Oh
as
yeah.
the mother, and writing that scene, I was like, it doesn't scare me, but it definitely gave me like, oh, that's so like creepy.
Oh
I
yeah,
love
no,
it, you know.
yeah, I know exactly what you
Um,
mean. Yeah.
anyway,
Well,
all right, so
we at it as well, right? I guess. I mean, at least I do. I have fun when I write those kind of scenes.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and also sometimes you just feel like sometimes when I'm writing something I know is going to be disturbing, I just feel like such a sadistic bastard because I'm just like, oh, this is gonna be brutal. It's great.
Yeah.
People are gonna be freaked out. Um, so mountaineering is such a physical experience. Is losing control of yourself from possession a metaphor for the feeling of transcendence when you climb?
That's a good question. I hadn't looked at it like that. When you climb, climbing is very meditative, if you will. Whenever you go up there, you get into this cadence of your footsteps, just step by step by step, and it's forever. It goes on and on and on because it's such a far way out. I always, when I go into the mountains, before I go there, I always tell myself, I got these hours that I have to walk up, out of the valley, up in the mountains to the cabin or to the bivouac or to the summit. I'm going to think of these and these scenes because I need, I have all the time that I want, and then my mind will be free and all that. I never do. You have a completely empty head, an empty mind. It's like meditation because you become like hypnotized almost by the cadence of your steps. I don't think of anything. Sometimes a song plays in my mind, but whenever you come down from the mountains, you're completely relaxed. And that way, it is actually like meditation because it's as if you're completely rested mentally. So possession would be probably more the opposite because that's when there's the fears and it becomes strenuous on your mind, I think, and it would wear you out, I think. So I think that's more the opposite of it, maybe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting. I kind of feel the same way. I haven't climbed the mountains you've climbed, but I feel like because I work at home and because I'm always on deadline, I could probably make a list of like 15 deadlines I have right now.
Yeah.
That I never go away from it. And that, if anything, that's more like possession.
Yeah.
That sort of like, constant
pressure.
It's like the little demon on the back of your neck,
Yeah.
Whereas if I can go and hike in the wilderness or go and climb a much smaller mountain than the ones you climb, and you're tired by the end and you've sort of worn yourself out and you feel good and you're freed yourself from all of that stuff. It is sort of the opposite, but all right, Kai, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Kai, so if I'm not, apologies, says, how do you get yourself into the mindset to write something as dark and haunted as that?
Oh yeah. I mean that's of course what a lot of people ask us if you write stories like this, like what has gone wrong, like I am generally a very upbeat, happy person. People, when they read my stuff and they come out to a signing, especially in the Netherlands, I experience it, especially with so I have a readership that's all through all generations. Young people reading my book, there's elderly people reading my book, and everything in between. And especially when people are a bit older and then they come out to a signing and they see me, and then they always say, "How can a person that's so happy and smiling like you are write such dark things?" I actually don't know if there is a clear answer to that. I was drawn to scary stories from the get-go. Um, I I can probably tell you how it started, how I started liking scary stories. It was mainly because some scary stuff happened when I was a kid. Um, Plain and simple, my father died when I was really young. I was 3 years old. And as a child, I envisioned death as something that lived in the attic of our home, between the laundromat and the washing lines, and it was like a dark space there, and it could come down from there, catching me on the stairs or my mom or my sister. It was my childhood way of envision, giving meaning to something so incredible that happened. And I soon found that the only way I could get rid of these feelings was by writing these kind of stories, by telling scary stories that had place for these monsters and emotions, so that I could get rid of them, and that always stuck somehow. And I don't really need to transform my mind into a darker place or anything like that to dive into it. It's just it's part of my constitution, I think. How's that for you, Chris?
Yeah. When I was a senior in college, which was in 1988, 1989, Clive Barker toured around with Hellraiser. He was touring around universities and showing Hellraiser.
Awesome.
And I interviewed him at that time. That was the first time I met him. And Clive said, I've heard that you say you don't have nightmares. Are we supposed to believe that? And he looked at me and he said, and he pointed to the screen where they had just shown Hellraiser. And he said, why would I have nightmares? They're all up there.
Mm.
And I feel like, and again, like to quote another famous philosopher, Lady Gaga, baby, we were born this way.
Yeah.
I was born like this ever since I was the youngest I could possibly remember. I would see these things, and the things that being scared made me feel afterwards, I felt so much better. I felt good after being scared. And also it helped me to investigate the questions that I had, as you said, after your father died. It helped me to sort of interrogate the darkness, right? To investigate those questions that I had about the things that scared me. And so as a result, I also find that horror people, horror writers and horror fans are, without doubt, the kindest people you will ever meet in your entire life. It's the sweetest, the most generous. My agent has been working in this business for decades, and he represents writers in all genres, from literary writers, science fiction, romance, all genres.
Mm-hmm.
And he always says, no offense to his other clients, but he's represented many horror writers over the years. And he said, without a doubt, horror writers are the kindest.
We have relieved our fears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I feel like we understand other people's anxieties and fears because we have them ourselves, and we want to reach out a hand and say, yeah, see this thing over here? It's going to scare you, but I'm here with you. And at the end,
through it. Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
We'll get through it together, And I really believe that. I think that's part of what it is to do what we do.
Yeah. And at the same time, I think even though you're right, you want to lead the reader through that story and you'll be there and it will be okay in the end, I still get some kind of a kick out of trying to even get that last bit of that feeling of safety away when you read a story like that, right? Like whenever readers email me or message me on socials saying that, after reading Hacks, they had to sleep with the lights on because they saw that image of Catherine the witch in the book everywhere in the darkest corners of their room. I was like, yes, now I've done it right.
Yeah. No, I agree. I love that. And also, I'm if you're somebody who gets scared in horror movies, I'm the worst person to go to the horror movie with, because I am that asshole friend who will wait till the most terrifying moment and then clamp my hand on your shoulder and go,
Yep.
ha! You know, because if I could get you to scream, that's the greatest thing of all time.
Yep. Yep.
But, you know, as a writer, the only thing better than making a reader scared with just words on a page is if you can get them emotionally invested enough that they cry.
Yeah. You probably saw Hereditary, I guess, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastically scary movie. I saw the press release of Hereditary in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil with my Brazilian publisher in 2018 when I was on tour there. And my Brazilian editor, she's fantastic. She's a lot of fun, but she's also very mean. And when I sat next to her watching a movie, and I was like tensed up because I hated it in all the good ways, basically. And at some point, she'd moved very close to my ear, and then she went like, and I just jumped to the ceiling. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. So, what aside from climbing, what was your research like for Echo? And also, is there one particular thing that you did the most research on in the book?
So I had a lot of fun researching or going back, because I've read them all, but going back to the classics of our genre. Like I mentioned, Echo is my love letter to the Gothic novel. I narrated the book as a Gothic novel. A lot of it is in diary and manuscript and messages, emails, all that stuff. But I also, every chapter in the book I named after one of the classics. So there's the obvious ones like The Mountains of Madness or The Valley of Unrest by Edgar Allan Poe. But Wuthering Heights. There are really good titles that have to do with nature, with the grandness of nature, right, with the outdoors. But also more modern, like In the Hills, the Cities by Clive Barker, Misery by Stephen King. And I use an epitaph from that particular work as a motto over that chapter, and that foreshadows something that's going to happen in that particular chapter. And that was a lot of fun to puzzle with, because I know all these books. It was fun diving back in them and finding quotes that would fit well to the story I was writing. So it was an experience for me as well to dive back into that. And then after that, we had to get the rights for all these quotes, which was a challenging thing. But it managed, and especially the ones that are, because most of them are in the public domain because they're the older works. But especially the ones that are, like you say, horror people are the kindest people. I mean, Clive, Stephen King, that they all, without any trouble said, sure, you can use that.
Yeah. Well, I will say Clive himself has always been the most incredibly kind and generous and supportive and giving guy. And that's amazing, too, because I think In the Hills, the Cities is, a lot of people talk about it, but I don't think people really understand that it is probably one of the best and most disturbing horror stories written in the last 50 years.
I fully agree. Yeah.
I mean, Books of Blood in general is amazing, but that story In the Hills of Cities messed me up.
Yeah. Yeah.
The images from that story are still in my brain, and I read it. I mean, I probably read it for the last time I read it was probably at least 20 years ago. But I remember reading it the first time when it came out.
You should revisit it. It's fantastic. It's just these each other. It's I won't spoil too much, but
No. All right.
Yeah.
So listen, I think we're probably close to out of time, but I think we want to also say what is next, because obviously Echo is out now. Everybody who's watching us and everybody who will watch it later are all going to buy their copies from Mysterious Galaxy and get the signed book plate from you. So they're all going to order it from Mysterious Galaxy, which is fantastic. But everybody's going to always want to know what's next. So what comes after that?
So my Dutch publishing schedule is always a little bit ahead of the North American publishing schedule because I write in Dutch. I have a book already out in Holland. It's called Oracle. And Oracle will be out next year in the United States. And I love Oracle. It's a very exciting novel. Recently, a review came out in Holland that described it like, so this is basically a James Bond novel with horror. It's a fun story. It's action-packed. It's about a bunch of kids who bike to school one day in a misty December morning, and in a field, they see this ship, this Pirates of the Caribbean kind of old-fashioned sailing ship. It's on its side. It's in the field. It's no open water nearby. It shouldn't be there. It wasn't there the day before. What the hell is it doing there? They go and explore it, and there's a hatch on the deck that's open. And a couple of the kids go in, but they don't come back anymore. And so the ones who are left behind, they call their parents, and they go in to look for their kids, and they don't come back anymore. And then the search team of the police who goes to, find them, they don't come back either. So there's something really messed up going on there. And the ship foreshadows something much, much more bigger, ancient. That's, it's a battle between the sea and the land. And it's an exciting book, and it's action-packed, and it's a lot of fun. And it will be out.
It sounds fantastic.
Yeah. So
I can't wait.
What's your next?
Well, it's so funny you should say that. I've actually sort of said what it is a little bit, but I haven't named it. I haven't told people what it's called, but I think that now's as good a time as any to do that.
All right.
So it'll be out in late January. It's going to be another book from St. Martin's Press. It's called All Hallows. And it is a what I call a suburban folk horror novel set in 1985.
Okay.
In the same town that my novel Snowblind was set in. And it all takes place on Halloween night. It's got a lot of sort of suburban drama in it. It's, it's about families that are falling apart and, latchkey kids and parents that don't pay attention to their children. And what happens when there's something that you should be afraid of.
Okay.
I don't want to get too much more into it, but it's also got a lot of folk horror in it. And it's really interesting I didn't think about it this way when I was writing it, but only sort of today actually was I thinking about really, it is a folk horror story, and usually you think of those stories as happening in the wilderness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not in a suburban Massachusetts neighborhood with, the typical like middle class families and stuff like that. So it's a really
I like that.
Different. Yeah.
Can't wait to read it, man. That's really good.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, guys, so we're running out of time now. Just want to thank both of you guys for just one of the best horror discussions I've heard in a long time. Not just wonderful to hear about your books, but about the horror community, what it means for you guys to be tellers of fearful tales. So just one thing I want to ask you guys real quick is, where can people find you and follow you on your social media? And we'll drop links for you.
I'm easy. ChristopherGolden.com is my website. I'm at Christoph with no ER Golden on Twitter because at the time I had too many letters. So it's at Christoph Golden on Twitter. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook. And I'm easy to find.
Yeah, same here. I'm more of an Instagrammer and a Facebooker than I'm Twitter. Twitter's not in Europe, not really used that much. I am at Olde Heuvelt at Twitter, but I'm more active on Instagram, so you can find me there. And I story about what I do, and I I like to have that visual counterpart of the socials. So that's where you can find me.
Okay, thank you so much, you guys. And then just a reminder, if you look down below, there's that green button that says buy Echo and get a signed book plate. We ask you guys please to support the authors and our store. You can get the books here, and we will get you signed book plates from Thomas.
And through the same thing, you can get Road of Bones as well.
Yep, yeah, you can get Road of Bones.
Exactly.
And Christopher has also graciously offered to send us signed book plates. So we would love to share these wonderful tales of terror with you. At that, we're going to head on out. And so I just want to thank you all for being part of this. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you very much.
I really loved chatting with you. And thank you.
Go to bed, Thomas.
Yeah, I'll go to bed. I need it.
Good night, guys.
And bye-bye.